We are live.
All right, good morning, everyone. Apologies for delays, some technical difficulties across the board over here. Would like to call to order the July 25th meeting of the Policy and Implementation Committee. First order of business, can I get a motion and a second to adopt the minutes from our June 27th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great, thank you. First up, Susan is going to talk a little bit about the P&I Committee FY 26 work plan. You wanna give me the?
Yes, I got a few things I gotta do real quick.
Hold on 1 second while we. Not everybody
Get
ends
ourselves
their
arranged.
seat this morning.
Down is forward.
Down is forward. That doesn't seem right to me, but okay. Okay, so I'm not gonna spend too much time this morning talking about what the committee has already done over the past fiscal year. Normally I do a long presentation about accomplishments, but I thought you all know that already, so today I thought we'd focus more on the new fiscal year that we've already begun. And as part of this presentation, I'll touch on things that were also in the work plan last year that we're still going to be working on. And so we'll do a little bit of a progress update on some things. And then talk about some new initiatives, and then hopefully at the end, just hear from all of you about additional things that you're interested in pursuing. And then all of this will be informative and helpful when we put together the budget for FY 26, which we started doing in the last week or two. Oh, it worked. Yeah.
Cursor's possessed, you see it?
Yeah, so these are in no particular order. They're not in priority order, they're somewhat organized, but
It's the pointer? Why is it doing that?
I'll put it down. That was.
Huh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at. We are having all kinds of. I'll just put it over here, I'm gonna touch it. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, no particular order, not necessarily, priority order or any of that, just categories. As they popped into my head yesterday when I was putting this together. So obviously CMP amendments, we are not only in the process of proposing and hopefully adopting some amendments, we are also implementing amendments that have been adopted. And that is one of the things that I'm more and more aware of these days is it takes a long time to adopt amendments. It takes a long time and a lot of work and effort to implement them as well. Both internally with our own process and forms and information on our website, but also working with our municipalities who often have to adopt ordinances to implement the amendments themselves. And then Ernie's favorite, working with all the applicants to implement the amendments because we have all kinds of projects in progress that are affected. So that's what we're doing now with the code of coherency rules. We're in our implementation phase with applications, coordinating with DEP, and unfortunately dealing with the ongoing litigation filed by Clayton. So we'll ask Stacy to provide an update, but it's still ongoing. We are still waiting. Nothing has really happened recently of note, but that's still requiring some time and effort there. The larger set of amendments that are currently proposed, we've talked about many times. We are in the middle of our 60-day public comment period. These are the amendments that would redesignate the large area in Evesham from rural development to forest area. Also assign expiration dates to some very old waivers that the commission approved in the 80s, the early to mid 80s. Also to certificates of filing, which is really key. Because some of those are 40 years old as well. Number of application fee changes to deal with letters of interpretation and also violations. And some codifications, clarifications of standards for regional growth areas and the use of PDCs and municipal flexibility. So all of that is proposed, published. We had our hearing on last week, July 15th. It was quite well attended. Paul did an amazing job keeping track and everything moving along, and he was like a game show host. It was great. Because we had a lot of people, we had 54 people, who had testimony all via the phone lines. All in favor of the amendment and urging the commission to adopt it. That's very unusual public comment for the commission. Usually it's never anything. So that was nice. Here, actually, we have received hundreds of emails, written comments on the amendments as well. And the comment period runs through August 15th, so there's still plenty of time for comments. After which we will prepare the typical response document, answer any questions that were raised in the comments, and bring that back to this committee for consideration later this year. And hopeful adoption, and hopefully that'll all happen by the end of the year, or early January when the rule could take effect. And then you'll see their implementation. There'll be a lot to do to implement these rule changes. Obviously, there are map changes we'll be working with each township on, but there are also a lot of things that affect applications, application forms, fee calculator, all kinds of things that we're gonna have to do to reflect the changes in our documents, and work with applicants who are effective, and there will be hundreds of that, so.
Sue, if I may, how are we doing with the written comments? Are they pretty much positive?
Oh, yes, all of them.
Oh, okay, good.
All but one that I've seen at least are in favor of moving forward, and they are all focused on the Black Mountain watershed.
That's what I figured.
There's one, we did receive one other comment that's related to expiration of certificates of fire, and that's it. So far, as far as I know, like,
And one person who wasn't for or against, he was just concerned that his rights would be taken away if the.
everything.
What, well, he has property in the watershed and then.
Oh, okay.
And he's saying that his access will be blocked. Because he's, like, just, he doesn't understand,
Okay,
you know.
okay, so.
So Stan has done a very good job with those, with the things, that's the case.
Well, we still have plenty of time. People who tend to want to object to things the commissioner is doing, wait till the last
Right,
day
right.
of comment period, so stay tuned. Okay, so those are the two amendments, that are either adopted or actually in progress, and then, here's our list of things, some of which were in the work plan last year that we are gonna be continuing to work on. Obviously, we have our old right-of-way transmission line pilot program, vegetation management rules. And then we've been spending a good amount of time working on possible amendments to deal with accessible trails. That's largely in response to the MOAs that the commission has been asked to enter into for municipalities. We're looking at how to make some amendments to our wetlands protection standards related to accessible trails. A lot of research has gone on, some draft rule language is being put together. Internally, we've been meeting, so that is moving along. We have that to show you by the end of the year, I would say. We'll have something for you all to look at and think about. Likewise, like, this probably needs a better term, but we refer to it around here as the gap process, the gap approval process. This is revisions or an additional process written into the rules for projects for development applications that are proposed by private companies or entities. But they don't actually get municipal or county approvals. I think infrastructure, pipelines, cell towers, there's a number of projects that we would say fall into the gap into our rule. If there's no municipal or county approval, then the commission doesn't have anything to review and sign off on and make a determination that all of our standards are met. Somebody needs to do that, either the commission needs to do that, we need an approval directly from the commission, or we need a municipal or county approval to review. Since these projects don't get those local approvals, that means the commission itself needs to review and approve them, much like you do currently for public development projects. So resolution, action, and a commission meeting. So we're writing all of that. down, the proposal is. The rule language is done, we're working on the actual proposal part of that, so we should have that for you in the coming months as well, as for this committee to look at. And then I've thrown in some other things that are largely procedural, but they could result in the need for additional tweaks and amendments to the rules. You can make a long package together with perhaps the gap approval process rule, but there are things that have come up over the last year and actually very recently, the one on the bottom there. Stacy talked about this at the last commission meeting, there's new legislation about legal advertising, official newspapers, where you publish, the website. That will affect not only, we think, the commission, but also when we ask, our rules require that, for example, applicants for public development publish notice as well. So they'll be affected as well, so it's not something we're going to do right away because the new legislation doesn't even kick in until March, maybe, is that right?
March 20.
Late March 2026. So, there are some things that we need to see play out on the state level before we go racing ahead with our own rules, but it is on my radar screen as things we probably need to change some wording and, reflect the new standards or the requirements in our rules, along with some other things that are causing us consternation, like some certain types of large applications, they can submit a third of their application fee if they want us to review a threatened and endangered species survey, for example, but they don't want to submit the rest of their application yet. And then escrows are also something the commission can require for unusual or complicated applications. And my thought here is we need to probably try to standardize a lot of these fees, and the payment procedures. That may be rules, it may be just internal procedures, but I want to put that all on the radar because we are having to think about it because of various applications and escrows that have been paid over the years. So that's, I just thought I'd put that up there so you know we're thinking about it at least. Memorandum of agreement. Stafford and Pemberton accessible trail underways are on here because they're done, essentially, at least the commission's part of those is done. But we are still working with Eastern Township on their accessible trail proposal and in the Black Run Dirt. So we'll continue to do that. We have been having some conversations recently with South Jersey Transportation Authority about additional development at the Atlantic City Airport that they are very interested in proceeding with in the long term, not immediately, but they're working on that project. They're coordinating with FAA and the environmental assessment work that they'll need to do for FAA. Laura and I met with their executive director and staff. May have been earlier this week in Monday. Just to sort of, get some basic information, talk about the process, what they're looking to do. The next step will be for them to submit a more detailed proposal, concept plan, review the standards that are involved. I think it's clear to both of us and SJTA that the project would require amendments to the Atlantic City Airport MOA. That's really not a question that would definitely be necessary. It's just for what and how would that all work and where exactly is the development going? What sort of threatened and endangered species work is required, all of that. So just at the very beginning stages of those discussions, but it is something that I'm gonna reflect on the work plan because we do expect that we'll be working with them going forward. I don't know exactly what their timing is, but we want to be prepared and coordinated with them and FAA, so.
Do we worried about possibly the FAA stepping in on that one?
Well, no, we are coordinating with FAA.
Oh,
They have a role
right.
here.
Okay,
That
right.
we're, yes, in fact, Stacy just coordinated with them yesterday, so all that's fine. That's
I was
the
afraid
goal.
everybody did.
We had a joint-
Ride everything.
No.
Oh.
we have very good.
We had a joint meeting earlier with FAA and SJTA. And Stacy was in close communication with them all the time because they have their own issues and requirements.
Right.
They understand we have ours. I'm hopeful that the information that they require for threatened endangered species and other environmental works will inform our process too. So
Okay,
for now, we're coordinated.
good, thank you.
So those are two sort of specific MOAs that we'll be working on to some extent during this year. There's also, I think, a continuing need to keep looking at some very old MOAs that the commission has largely with DEP, but another one came up the other day when we were meeting with the state planning commission people, like, that's really old too, 1999 or something, you know. So, we have a very old forestry MOA with DEP, for example, wetlands permitting, all kinds of these, they're very old. I think some of the relook and updating may need to happen once we take a look at DEP's real rules. I think you've probably all seen that they've sent out notices now to make certain changes to their real rules before they adopt. They hope to adopt, I think, in December or January. Those may have an impact on some of our existing MOAs, and so we need to be prepared to really look at that implementation aspect of the rules. And then I think in blue here, blue is the key for something new. I think that it would be helpful for us to, much like we do with permanent land protection and the PNC Bank report, Science Office providing an annual update, I think we need to start doing that with MOAs as well. Just so the commission is aware of what's been accomplished through the MOAs, what issues we run into, and you know, what we're looking to do in the future. So you'll see that on probably a finance commission agenda in the future. We talked to you about this recently for our work plan for the federal fiscal year with our economic monitoring funding from the National Park Service. So this is just a reminder. Finishing up, fingers crossed, our new local conformance and zoning system, which is going to be fabulous. I've seen it, you know, in its testing phase, and it's really going to be so informative, both for the staff, but ultimately for the public as well. Hoping we'll have a training seminar for municipal officials and representatives next spring. Focused on this, showing them how it can be helpful to them as well. And then the big project is a new one in blue, which is a redo of and development of an enhanced and modernized application tracking and reporting system. Ours is very old. This is what we use to track all application transactions and documents and activity. It's good at that. It's not particularly good at reporting out data and generating useful information other than, you know, transactional steps related to specific development applications. So we have a lot of ideas, and we're going to get started on that. Gina's actually started a wish list, sort of, that people can go in there and write down all the things they've always wanted the system to be able to do. So we're going to get started with that. And the goal really is twofold. It's for obviously for our own internal use, but it's also to, I think, someday be able to provide some kind of limited public access to the system, so that people who want to know what's the status of my application, did you receive my survey, they can look in the system themselves and answer those questions. I'm excited, although somewhat daunted. But anyway, number of other things that are continuing. We are in the middle of our Pinelands Conservation Fund land acquisition funding rounds for this year. The deadline is sometime in September, mid-September. Yes. After which we will review the project proposals and come back to this committee with recommendations. So that'll be happening this fall. Another permanent land protection summit in the spring. More stewardship and monitoring reports for preserved properties. Annual report on permanent land protection to the commission will be coming up later this year. Land use office has been extremely busy reviewing municipal housing elements and fair share plans for the 4th round of affordable housing. Do you remember the number offhand that we've seen?
It's in 20.
In 20, so we're getting a lot of them, most of which we have been able to review and write back pretty quickly to say these don't raise any issues because they don't propose any projects in the Pinelands area, or we're already aware of the projects. There's no zoning changes necessary to accommodate them. There are a couple that are proposing,
redevelopment plans or zoning changes. And those will require more detailed conversations with the municipalities and probably ultimately action by this committee and the full commission to approve them. So that's gonna be ongoing for a while, I think, during the year. And we are still anticipating, we haven't received, formal final cellular plan amendment yet, but we are anticipating that still. We did have a meeting, I guess maybe last month, with the applicant to just talk about the process, the timing, and what the amendment would need to include. So I think it is likely we will see that during this next fiscal year.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just saw in the news that they're thinking of changing, I think it was the real program.
Yeah.
To give waivers for building affordable housing in areas that normally they wouldn't be allowed in. I was wondering how much that might cause problems for. I don't know if there's big overlap.
It's not-
It's postal
yeah.
stuff, but.
It's not gonna cause us problems.
Okay.
But, and that was actually, we all sat in on a webinar that, a short webinar, Zoom, I don't know what you call it, that DEP held. And that was one of the questions from, several attendees. Why are you allowing for waivers? Why would you encourage affordable housing in flood hazard areas? And their answer was to show us the existing rule, which already provides some exemptions and waivers for projects that include affordable housing, so they were basically saying we aren't changing that.
I think, so didn't they also say that they were. They still had to make sure they still had to make sure the developer, that is, that the property was, the affordable housing was on higher ground as opposed to a low point.
Yeah, I saw that they were going to try to make sure that they could mitigate the fact that it was in a hit hazard zone
Yeah.
by raising it up. or
Yeah,
something, which
that's-
doesn't exactly, well.
Yeah, it isn't really a concern. I mean, we aren't obligated to allow housing of any kind in wetlands or on wetlands.
That's
So
what.
that's not a
Okay.
concern, but it definitely will be raised as part of their proposal of these changes, because the way it's worded in their proposal that they put out, or their explanation of the changes, definitely was raising red flags for people. So see how that goes along.
Thank you.
Other projects, Pinelands Infrastructure Trust Fund. We're continuing to monitor the projects. I guess that was, this 2019, 2020, when we gave out the funding on the last round. So none of the projects have been built, much less received their funding yet, right? Has it been allocated, like actually given out at all to any project yet?
No, but
No.
Pemberton is very closest,
Pemberton for their water system improvements is very close.
at least for a portion of.
So, seems to take a very long time, and there are all kinds of issues, but, so the funding is still out there and allocated to the project from years ago. Gina's been working with DEP on their amended infrastructure funding rules, which we expect that will be adopted sometime this fiscal year. And then this one in blue is sort of a new, not really new, but sort of, I'll say new idea, something that came to light, or that we started thinking about more seriously this week after a meeting with one of our municipalities. You know, we had the Infrastructure Trust Fund, the Bond Act from 1988. That's all the funding that we've had all this time. I think it's a good opportunity to think about how can we go about getting new funding, a new bond act, whatever it is, for infrastructure, to support, again, it's to support our growth areas, largely regional growth areas, with housing projects, affordable housing projects. You know, you could come up with a lot of reasons. We have some of these municipalities that are environmental justice or overburdened communities. They can't fund these things themselves. They don't have their own utilities, you know, they need financial assistance from the state. You know, free developers, whatever it is, they need assistance. I think there's just a whole slew of issues that sort of come together around this. I mentioned affordable housing, the environmental justice issue, climate resiliency, where you're looking for growth areas that have uplands that are outside of wetlands, that are away from the coast. These are their designated growth areas. Trying to find a way to assist these municipalities, I think, is very important. So we're gonna think some about that, come back to you all with some ideas and see if we can't make some headway with that this year. Other things that we are required to do under the rules, one of them is an implementation report on our septic pilot program is due in August or November. Forget date, we'll be showing that to this committee, making recommendations about what the data tells us in terms of the new systems that are being piloted for residential development, whether it needing more time for results and any kind of data, or whether any of them have been successful or not. We'll see. So that's upcoming later this year. Also under our rules, Cape May County Municipal Utilities Authority landfill that operates in Upper and Woodbine is due to provide a 5-year waste flow report update on the amount of waste and the capacity of the landfill, so that'll be coming up. PDC related things, we're working busily on the PDC Bank's annual report, which is due, required by statute to be issued at the end of August. After which we will focus a little bit more on finishing up our supply and demand methodologies and estimates, reporting mechanisms, see if that leads to any recommended changes to the PDC program we might want to talk to the commission about. Continuing to work on new legislation related to the PDC Bank. Stacey did a draft. We're thinking about additional changes. We're going to be looking for sponsors for that legislation. Essentially, it's to move the bank here formally to make it part of the commission rather than a separate agency. Perhaps eliminate the board because we have a board that could serve those functions. And give the bank some additional authority when dealing with buyers and sellers, PDCs. That part requires funding, so we're looking at funding sources that we might be able to take advantage of to help the bank be a little more active. We're going to continue to work on that. And actually, my goal is we have to get that done before the bank's rules are set to expire, and we need the bank board to readopt them, because the bank board largely doesn't exist, so we have to move along. So this would be a good year to do it. And so I put a number of things here under the category of climate resiliency initiatives. Solar facility siting standards in the CMP we know need some updating and clarification. We have a list of those. We're going to be continuing to try to work with BPU on their dual use solar pilot program and how best could the commission participate and how best could Pinelands farmers be allowed to participate. Jerry and Stacy arranged for a presentation by Rutgers at your next meeting, yes, in August, on the sites, the solar projects that they're piloting. And we are going to be hoping to have a little more information from BPU before then as well, so that we can help the committee make some recommendations about how best to proceed for this next year. We will and are continuing to participate with the Interagency Climate Council in their monthly meetings, or it seems like there's more than monthly meetings, but they have various work groups that we're serving on. They're doing a lot of focus on flooding right now. That's their next. They did extreme heat first. That was a big focus, which is relevant for today, that's for sure. They're focusing on flooding now. So you'll probably be seeing some postings from the council and DEP that we'll be sharing too about upcoming events and things they're working on, publications that they want all state agencies to participate with. So that's going to be an ongoing effort for sure. We also had in last year's work plan some work on threatened and endangered species protocols. We did do a whole presentation for this committee about survey protocols and working with consultants and what the staff's role and all of that is. So that part of things was done. More specifically related to plants. we didn't make progress on these two things last year, but I hope to do that in this coming years, working on a data sharing agreement with DEP on plant data. We have one for animals. We've never been able to get one done for plant data. We need to do that. We're going to change our list of protected plants or adopt, DEP's list or anybody else's. We need to make sure that we have the data sharing agreement locked down. We're all working from the same information. And then we can consider, it's been recommended many times to this committee and the commission by various people that we should be adding plants to our list and protecting them when applications for development come in. So that will remain on the work plan. Also in blue here, artificial turf and extreme heat issues, those ties together, at least in my mind. We have heard from a number of commissioners who are interested in taking this up as an issue. And so we have already been doing some coordination with DEP, Office of Science and Research, to learn more about their efforts that are ongoing right now to look at the research and the data that's out there, compile everything, make some recommendations. They're scheduled to come to an upcoming P&I meeting to brief this committee on their recommendations and findings. Along with somebody from Green Acres who come and talk about how they address the issues when dealing with grant applications for funding, so. That is something we are looking into and working on, and we'll see. Once we have DEP's information, what that would suggest that the commission should or shouldn't proceed with on its own. And then also here, just as a reminder. We didn't do much of this last year, but we do need to think always about when we're working on these new initiatives, like artificial turf, for example. Making sure that whatever we do, we're tying back to the Pinelands Protection Act, which is our enabling legislation and lays out what the commission's authorities are and aren't, as the case may be. Just to make sure that we're acting within the limits of our authorities, so that'll be one of Stacy's jobs for the year. Whenever we come up with ideas, we're gonna ask her to make sure that we're on solid ground before we proceed with amendments or additional work like that.
I want to thank you. It's good to see that blue line on there. I'm really glad. Because we've had some public issues with that too. I hate. I just want to make sure that doesn't take over because of me, from some of the things that we've put off for a year or two, especially if the plant thing can be done, that would be really nice, especially to get that, and solar power, obviously, so I think it's pressing. The other thing I would add that as the extreme, it is definitely an extreme heat issue. It's also a water supply,
Yeah.
water use issue.
Well, that's what
And I want to make sure that's
Yes.
right, and we don't have very much information on that that I know of, so that's.
Yes, but
That's another time.
you've exactly hit on, the issues for the commission in terms of artificial
Right.
turf. Cannot be public health related,
Correct.
right? They have to be tied to water supply, water quality, stormwater, that type of thing,
Right.
so.
Right.
And yes, it is a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to say that all we're gonna do all of
Sure.
these things, but and we will make progress, I think, on all of them. It's just obviously some things are gonna be more timely than others, and we'll do our best. But
The other thing was Jen and DEP had a Zoom, I guess it was, or a presentation yesterday about extreme heat. Did somebody from staff?
Yes,
Because I signed up, oh good, because I signed up and I couldn't do it, something came up.
yeah, so there was a I don't know, webinar, Zoom,
Yeah.
I don't know what I call it, but it was from the Interagency Climate Council.
Oh, that's
who sponsored it, related to extreme heat and ecosystems. It was only like an hour long, it was very short, and it was very like rapid fire. The moderator asked questions and
Is it available online? 'Cause
I believe they said it would be not immediately, but it will be available.
So they'll give it to me.
So you'll get the link.
Was it digital or what?
I was hoping it would be,
Informative.
I was hoping that it would be more geared towards recommendations
Yeah,
and actions that should be considered, and it really wasn't.
that's what I read, okay.
But maybe that'll be next, hopefully. That's where things tend to have, we run into issues, like, well, what should we do? And then it becomes, well, we're not.
It's the so what, and what do we do about it?
So, I think they have another one coming up, but I'm not sure what that one.
Yeah, it's-
Oh, there you go. So that's. Those are work plan projects and initiatives that this committee, they're policy related. This committee will be hearing about and asked to think about and make recommendations about. I could do a whole other presentation, and I will, when it comes to the commission meeting and the budget, on all the other things that the commission staff will be doing at the same time that don't involve this committee, like Ben Manor, there's more, Ben Manor project, for example. All kinds of administrative things, application reviews, of course. I didn't mention ongoing work like review of ordinances and master plan, the redevelopment plan, all that will be going on too. I really just wanted this to focus on very specific projects that this committee will touch. And then also, little question marks are really for you all, if you have other thoughts, ideas, suggested initiatives or projects you want us to be thinking about when we put the budget together and assign projects and work to various staff. Please be thinking about that, even if you don't have things you want to suggest today, you can email me or call me separately, but I would just ask that you do that over the next month because it could affect the budget and how we allocate funds and what we use the Pinelands Conservation Fund for. So need to sort of plug all that information into the budget preparation too.
Awesome. I mean, thank you for this and obviously it's a, as Susan said, a snapshot through the lens of this committee. Into the work being done, but incredibly big bites we're taking. So, thank you. Any commissioners have any comments, questions, ideas, thoughts?
I do, Madam Chair, if I might.
Hold on, we're gonna go Jerry first.
Okay,
I'd just like to commend Susan for pursuing the credit bank matter and bringing that more in line with what's happening. Also pleased to see artificial turf on the, and I'd like to see some of the residuals from artificial turf that lay in the soil and eventually get into the groundwater based on some of the hazardous studies that I've read. For consideration, if you would, I'd like to see an update an adding of additional native species on the list, particularly as it affects the farm community beyond blueberries and cranberries. Corn is a native species, tomatoes, native species. I'd like to see them included. Perhaps you could pursue with Rutgers. They have, they really know what native species affects the farm community. I'd also like to see a continuation of updating of the CMP as it relates to definitions, particularly as I understand it, certain lines implemented by either water or gas are exempt from review. And I'd like to see the definitions revised, particularly for transmission, distribution, and service, so that a service line may be considered as a waiver because it is one house, whereas a transmission line or a distribution line, which serves more than one house, should really come under our consideration and not be exempt. And lastly, I'm glad to see you pursuing escrow. But I'd like to also see you pursue bonding as related to that, because the municipalities do include bonding, but for the most part, they don't protect the bonding that we need as it relates to endangered species, as it relates to watershed issues. They're more interested in the infrastructure, whereas we would be more interested in protecting the environment. So appreciate all the hard work you put into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Mark?
thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to commend the staff. I mean, this is an ample list of work that they've set on their plates and set before us. Some really meaty tasks in there. The ongoing task of CMP review and amendment, the reviewing all of our MOAs, a very comprehensive task. PDC bank rules, reviewing that again. That's all great. A lot of heavy duty work that you've got there. Through it all, I'm really gratified to see that the climate resiliency issues still remain a priority for this committee. So we're not forgetting about them as we delve into these other things. I did have one follow-up question from the presentation. Susan, you referred to the real rules, the resilient environments and landscape rules. And I'm a little confused because if I understood what you said correctly, then we're looking at next fall sometime for implementation. And yet I think the last time we talked about this, I thought that, all the public review had been completed. The DEP had made what amendments they were going to make, and the rules had been sent to the governor's office for his approval, and that there was a deadline for the governor's approval of sometime in August. Isn't that still true?
So, DEP just recently, filed a notice to, put the rules back in the register as a revised proposal. They're proposing changes to them, so they be due the making. And that's just happened in the last couple weeks. So they're
Wow.
going back through a public comment period on the changes to the rules that are being proposed. And don't expect them to be adopted until, I think they said early January. Back
Wow.
in,
Okay.
signed by the commissioner and in effect until early January now.
I see.
With regard to the real rules, there's a great deal of opposition in the farm community. Farm Bureau has not endorsed the real proposal, particularly as it relates to the 5 foot increase in flood hazard areas. So
Mhm.
there's been a lot of opposition to the real rules.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Actually, Mark, I can send you, and anybody who's interested, we can send you links to the new DEP, the notices they've put out. If you want to see what they're proposing to change, we can send those around.
Pretty sure.
Yes, I would. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Justin, did you have?
I just want, oh, yes, thank you. I would like to ask Commissioner Lobauer a question as former chair of the former Climate Change Committee. Did you have any additional things? Were there any holdovers or leftovers from that work plan that you had, that draft work plan that you had put together that needs to be added to the?
Um, uh, we could certainly talk about specific amendments to the CMP that I had proposed a couple of years ago, and I'd be happy to take that up with the executive director again. I'm sure she knows I had written a memo at one point about it, but I presume that generally speaking, those ideas remain concepts to be considered under what she discussed as CMP amendment in general. So
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Just want to make sure we capture it.
Alan or Doug, any questions or comments?
The only comment, I agree with some of the new efforts, like the T&E species being in coordination with DEP. And I was happy to see a discussion of artificial turf, but I was gonna, I wanted to clarify whether the MOA with Evesham for the accessible trail, is that a separate MOA from the whole Black Run effort, kind of incorporating the map that they've come up with? And so is it the broad MOA rather than just specifically the accessible trail?
Yeah, so the,
Yeah.
the MOA is the one that this committee reviewed when they.
Right. Yeah, so it just was listed as MOA for the accessible trail, so I just wanted to clarify that distinction.
Yeah, that's the MOA, it's for the
Yeah.
accessible trail.
Right.
Separate, Alan, anything?
I do have one thing to talk about. We have linked a number of our regulations to DEP regulations, and DEP seems to be more inclined to change the regulations, which therefore change our regulations, which bring into a whole new conformance or compliance with our towns. And I particularly mentioned stormwater, which has a significant impact on a development application, especially a larger development application that may be done in phases. And I think we need to have a period of reliance on a certificate of filing where the applicant has made application to the town and is pursuing actively the application that the certificate of filing has been issued for, so that in the middle of it or 2/3 down the line, we don't change our stormwater regulations and find out that the whole application doesn't work anymore. I think we owe it to an applicant to have some consistency going forward from the issuance. And it doesn't have to be unlimited, but it should be some period of time. CAFRE uses 5 years, I think. Mark would probably know exactly, but some period like that where there's some protection, like in the municipal land use law where you're protected against zoning changes. An observation is that infrastructure money director is going to be very tight. It's going to depend on what the federal government does in terms of replenishing some of the infrastructure investment funds that are out there. I know that just the current state environmental infrastructure bank is running short of funds because everything is so terribly expensive these days when you talk about materials and construction costs. A quick question, Sue, have we added, how many new alternative design septics have been added in the last year or so, roughly? Do we know?
It's been several years, because I think Ed was still working at the time, so we've been piloting, I think maybe it was 3 or 4 new ones, you know, 4? 4.
But they've been in a long time. They're not recent.
Well, we added, years ago, we added 4 new systems.
No, but I mean, how many applicants have opted to use?
In the ground, how many have been installed? Do you know?
Fairly limited.
Stay tuned, not a big number.
I didn't think so.
Not a big number, in fact, I would probably guess that of the 4 that we're currently piloting, there may be none of certain systems. But
And on the artificial turf issue, I think it's good to coordinate with DEP and learn what they're doing. But I think that our ability, the commission's ability to do significant standards or regulations on what I think is like a $6 billion a year business in New Jersey is probably limited. And, you know, I think actual standards have to come from one of the larger research players like EPA or DEP. Just an observation, just a thought. And I think a lot of your time's going to be caught up in Fenwick Manor, which is an onion.
I know you keep saying.
Thank you.
For the sake of the minutes, I'm going to presume that Alan was referring to Mark Moriello when you said.
Yes, Mark
Because
Moriello.
I certainly don't know about CAFRA rules.
No,
Yeah,
I
say
think
you're
Mark
holding out on
knows
us.
better than I do.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Susan? This was really great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, next up, our ground penetrating radar projects presentation. Very excited for this one, Mark.
It's gonna take a second here. this. Right. Have your hair. Right. Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this presentation is to give an update on the ground penetrating radar surveys that the commission has conducted over the last few years. I'm Mark Paulvas, I'm the archaeologist for the commission, and for those who don't know. So here's what we're gonna be going through. I'm gonna start the presentation with a little background information on ground penetrating radar itself. How does it work and what are the benefits for archaeology, and how specifically how it can be used for finding unmarked burials. After that, I'm gonna go over two projects that are completed. One that was done at St. Mary's in the Pines Cemetery in Pleasant Mills. And then another that was completed in the African Methodist Episcopal Cemetery in Tabernacle. At the end, just sort of a teaser on a project that I finished the field work for at White's Bog, where I'm still processing the data. This is an example. Oh wait, I can be. Oh no, it's there. Of a profile. This is a subsurface profile taken from our GPR unit. So, GPR, it's a geophysical survey method that uses a wheeled device, like you can see here, and it sends a pulse of electromagnetic wave that will reflect back at it and then be recorded by it as well. You basically walk this thing in linear transects like you're mowing a lawn, and you go over an entire area like that. So yes, this is this video is showing basically how it would record this object like a utility pipe, which is mostly what it's used for, is for utility markout. That's probably the most common use for this technology, but it's very useful for archaeology as well. But yes, the wave comes out in a cone-like shape. So you can see here, maybe I'll try to stop this video. When the wave first hits the subsurface object, it's gonna read it where the machine is. So since it's further away from it than it is deep, it's gonna show it as deeper. And then as you get to it, and you're right on top of it, it shows you the actual depth. And you'll get these shapes that are called hyperbolas, these arch shapes. Other shapes that you'll get are planes. And yeah, you're not gonna get lifelike images like you see in Jurassic Park.
Does the program automatically account for your change in direction, or do you have to go back and start it?
You know, there's multiple ways to do it. I find the data is much cleaner if you go in the same direction every time. So basically I go in one direction and I reel it back and I start a new line, but you can technically do it in both directions.
It's a lot of walking, but I just.
It's a lot of
Get your steps in.
So here's an example of, I did this in front of Fenwick Manor. I was testing out the equipment and I saw that there was a water pipe mark out coming from the street towards the building. So that's what this is right here. You see this hyperbola? The top is gonna read it where its actual depth is. It's about 3 feet or so. But yeah, that's just an example of a hyperbola right here. That's the most common type of reading that you'll see in these. Here's another one. It's what's called plane or planar sort of reading, and this is where you get a flat. So it's gonna come down and reflect straight. And so this is probably what this is a significant change in the sediment. Like, so up here you might have some like drier sand, and down here it might be more clay rich, so it's gonna reflect at that layer. Also here, what I noticed is we've got a hyperbola here, and there's a break in the sediment and possibly some evidence of disturbance. And you can see slightly darker sort of ripples. So this might be another utility action. The strength of that reflection is, this is like rich sciencey stuff here. But the strength of that reflection is gonna be based on the contrast between the object that is reflecting and the soil matrix that it's within. So for example, just an easy example, if you have dry sand, beach sand, and you bury a bottle of water, you're gonna get a really strong reflection because water is 81, has a dielectric permittivity value of 81, and dry sands are 4, so that's a huge contrast.
Oh, okay.
And air also is 1, so air is important for this, these cemetery surveys that I'm gonna talk about that in a minute, but yeah, basically the wetter the sand, since water has such a high value, the sort of the higher the dielectric permittivity value of it. But if you're in really wet clay and you're looking for dry granite, then it's also gonna reflect. The reverse works as well. The one thing that I have here, let's see. Yeah, so in the dry sands like we have in the Pinelands, you can actually get pretty deep readings because it allows the wave, it doesn't attenuate, it doesn't dissipate the wave as fast as it does in like areas with really clay rich soils, so it's one positive here.
Just trying to get some of this technical stuff
Yeah.
together. You have to go one way several times across an area.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're trying to get a 3-dimensional picture. Do you also need to go in the other direction? If you're going north-south, you have to do it in east-west run too.
You can,
Does it help with your readings to do that?
that is more helpful if you're looking for linear. Like a lot of times for utilities, that is necessary because if you happen to be running along with the utility, you might completely miss it. So doing that grid, that double grid, like is pretty much essential. For archaeology, things we're looking for, you're usually gonna see it in one. So from what I have researched and watched, it appears to be better to, instead of doing that from the X and the Y, just doing more from one.
Closer together
Yeah.
on the one axis. Okay, thank you.
Metal has a infinite permittivity value, so none of the electromagnetic wave gets through. So it will actually give you like a really, really strong reflection. You also won't be able to see anything below it because of that. So yeah, the benefits. The biggest benefit for archaeology is that it's not invasive, because archaeology is destructive. So it's destructive because you actually have to remove the resource from its context while you're documenting it, essentially destroying. So a lot of archaeological sites are not visible from the surface. So you have to do a lot of excavating in order to find them and find the significant areas of them. So this can help you identify potential artifacts or structures without actually doing any physical excavation. Here you can see an archaeologist in its natural habitat.
Digging.
This is actually me years ago. This site had about 2 to 3 feet of hardened silt on top of the archaeological deposits that we had to remove. So I really wish we had GPR for this one.
For real.
Here is about like the gold standard for what you can achieve with GPR. This is in Italy. It's at a Roman city. And here you can see, I mean, they found an entire city infrastructure here. You got this theater, multiple temples, big monument, a market area, bathhouses. So yeah, when you're developing research questions, which is an essential part of doing archaeology, we're not just treasure hunting. We're trying to answer actual research questions. So, you know, you can use this data to develop some really interesting research questions, such as like, I don't know how, if you want to understand their trade networking, you can possibly, you know, do some digging at the market or something. You want to know what deities are more prevalent in this city, you could look into temples, you know, that kind of thing. You can also avoid archaeological sites by using GPR completely. if you know you're in an area with a lot of archaeological sites and then you have blank, like an area where you don't see any features or anything, you can help. It can help you avoid. You're still gonna have to do some digging. Also, yes, it can go through pavement. So if we can't do, normally we dig shovel tests, you can't do that in pavement. So without using a backhoe to remove it first. So this can kind of give you an idea of where the features are at the site. You can then be more surgical with your backhoe and target those areas instead of ripping up the whole thing, and saves a lot of time and money. All right, so now I'm gonna be talking about, just sort of a warning, I'm gonna be talking about human remains. I'm not showing any images or photos of them, but I will be talking about human remains as targets, but of the GPR surveys, so I just wanna like make it clear that
Yeah.
this project is for the, identification, recognition, and ultimate protection of these burials. Here's a wooden grave marker. That's a lot of historic graves are marked with wooden markers that are no longer visible, hence why these projects are necessary. So there's really three main ways of finding these unmarked burials that I've discovered, and one of them is just from a fallen grave marker. A lot of times they'll fall over and they'll actually be just under the surface, in which case you would see one of those hyperbolas just below the surface. Probably the most common way is actually getting a reading from the caskets themselves, which, depending on the material that they're made of, reflect differently. Like this image shows, this is probably a metal or a lead lined casket, and this is probably a wooden casket. So they're the same, but they're much weaker reflection, much stronger reflection.
How does bone show up on the permitted?
Bone.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a kind of weak reflection, but it could be visible, and also you're gonna have hopefully some other grave goods of clothes, honestly, sometimes, or belt buckles even, you can pick up on a lot of things. So it's gonna be weaker than even this, because this is probably reading even like the air inside. These don't appear to be collapsed. The air inside, it's a permittivity of 1, will contrast. So the grave shafts can also sometimes be visible. This isn't as I haven't noticed this, at least in the Pinelands. We've got this, loosely consolidated sandy soils, so they tend to homogenize quicker than other soil types, but this can be seen, and so like sometimes it'll make an X because you'll be walking towards the grave shaft, and then you'll reflect actually off the far side, which will show up here, and then when you pass it, you'll reflect across this, which will show up here, and it'll be like an X. Also, like kind of like what we saw earlier with the Fenwick Manor ones, like you can see disturbance sometimes. And so you'll have this homogeneous soil, and then you'll see this kind of disturbed looking area that could be evidence of a grave shaft. Here's our equipment. It's a US Radar Q5. It's got this tablet here, which you use to both record the survey itself and also analyze the data. It's 500 megahertz and it's auto calibrating. But the 500 megahertz is maybe interesting because if you go much higher, you can get deeper depths, but you'll have sort of a, what do you call it? Less vivid images or whatever. And if you go lower, you can have much more like, I'm spacing on the word right now, but anyway, 500 is apparently perfect for archaeology and cemeteries in general. This is just some other equipment that you'll need: pin flags for marking. You can actually see the profile real time through the tablet.
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, so when you're pushing it, if you see something, you should pin flag it, and then sometimes you can see a, just on the surface.
Like the outline of like.
Mhm. Alright, so reminder, now I'm gonna go over 3 projects, the 2 that are completed, St. Mary's and the AME Church. Surveys, and then finish with White's blog, and then after that, there'll be time for questions and everything too. So St. Mary's, here it is, it's actually marked on this map here, St. Mary's of the Assumption. Just for reference, here's Batsto, and here's the old mill at Pleasant Mills. Really interesting history here. This land was actually donated by Jesse Richards, who was the ironmaster at Batsto, in 1826. At that time, there was an influx of Irish and German Catholic immigrants, and also a lot of anti-immigration sentiment. But some of them ended up working at Batsto, apparently, and convinced Jesse that they needed their own place to worship, so he donated them a little piece of land there, and they built their church in 1827. It's actually the first church, the first Catholic church built south of Trenton, and probably the 3rd total in the state. It was formally dedicated in 1830. In 1860, almost certainly caused by the decline in the iron industry in South Jersey, the last church service was held. And in 1900, it was destroyed in a wildfire that actually destroyed much of the old portion of Pleasant Mills, unfortunately. Also, in that wildfire, probably destroyed some of the wooden grave markers. And so that's potentially sort of guessing at this, but why they maybe stopped burying people there in 1900 as well. Because they're actually still using the cemetery from 1860 to 1900, and then shortly after 1900, they stopped using it. Here's a nice watercolor that Mullica and the Pines Historical Society, we have a copy of it up in our office over there. Okay, here it is. So the field work was conducted in 2021 by my predecessor, Tony McNichol. And he set a 70-foot baseline along the edge of the wood line here. It's the north boundary of the parcel. And then he walked the transects, that would be north-south, along the parcel like this. And this big square is where the church foundation was. It's a memorial. So he set the transects every 5 feet for a total of 16 transects, and he also did 2 test passes over marked burials, so that you could see the signature of like what you'd find in a potentially unmarked. So.
Excuse me, you said the church foundation was a something, I couldn't hear the word.
It's where this this brick laid sort of part of the mound is, and this is like a memorial to
Oh,
him.
memorial, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a more recent structure.
Mhm, yeah,
There is a church on the property though, isn't
no.
there? Is there a church on the property? I thought there was right next to an older one.
There's another one down the street, like
Okay,
an
that's
older
close.
character. Yeah. So here's setting the baseline. You can see the pin flags every 5 feet. This is a grave marker for one of the test transects that I'm about to discuss. So here I've got side-by-side comparison. Here's the test transect that went over that known burial area, and there's three hyperbolas or markers that are where the graves were, and this might have been a metal casket, because you can see this long reflected anomaly here. So basically looked at these and then went through the others, all the other 16 lines, and looked for similar looking signatures, reflection signatures here. So this one, transect 4, got 3 of them. So this was basically the method used to identify potential grave spots. So for this one, there's 3 potential graves, and You know, there's no real way of knowing for sure, but some of these look pretty telling. Also on this one is possible foundation. Original foundation from the church, just below the surface. So through this study, there's 23 potentially unmarked burials identified. Those are marked off by these little red dots here. This is the church foundation. So yeah, there's
What are the
significant
white
number.
things? Are they numbers? I can't see from here. What?
Yeah, the white things are labeling the transects, so it says it's T1, T2, transect 1, transect 2, and so forth. So yeah, there could potentially be a lot more also in the film area. That's
Mark, are there are some that are under where the foundation of the church?
yes. There was 4 that were found underneath the foundation of the church here, so it's unsure if those are burials or they might be offerings of some sort or.
And you said too, you think that they still used it as a cemetery after the church?
Just shortly after it burned down, they stopped using it, so it could have even
Could have
been.
been right
It
after
could have
that.
been right after, because they could have been like, oh, well, there was none under the church, so you can use this.
Right.
Whereas the rest of the grounds were the wooden ones where they.
Where
and
they would have been destroyed in the fire. Yep. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Last times priests were buried under the churches.
That happens as
Oh,
well.
interesting.
Certainly in Europe for sure.
Yes, Westminster Abbey is famous for that.
Right, now we're gonna look at this African Methodist Episcopal Cemetery in Tabernacle. This also has an interesting history. The AME Church was actually founded in Philadelphia in 1816. The first mention of this church that's found was from the Burlington County Clerk's Office on a deed where the property was sold to the trustees of the AME Church, including these 3 individuals. And George Ayers, his headstone is at the church, and he was a Civil War veteran. He's the first known. He's believed to be the earliest burial at the site. So yeah, I couldn't find any information on historical maps that showed the church or the cemetery, but in 1930, I'll show you this. This is a 1930 aerial, and I believe that's the church.
Wow.
You can see Carranza Road right here. And then this is a little side road that used to exist that connected to Rozier Down Road over here. Yeah, there's also this interesting little wide driveway too, which I'll come back to. This is the only map. I included this 1942 USGS map because it has this little dashed line where this road is as well, so. Here, this is interesting. WPA, the Works Progress Administration, had a veterans grave registration survey throughout the state in the 1930s. And so in 1937, they mapped this site, and you can see George Ayers' grave right here. And then here they labeled the church as the foundation of Old Church. So apparently at that point, it was a foundation and not standing anymore. But there was at least something visible of the foundation, otherwise they wouldn't have mapped it. Now there's nothing. You can't tell anything from the ground, at least. So yeah, I use this. It shows it's about 50 feet away from George's grave. Oh, I also like this. You can't read this, I'm sure, but they labeled all the veterans' graves with the war that they fought in, and here it says the War of the Rebellion.
Wow.
So here is the site. And the field work was conducted September 21st, 2023. I gotta thank Rick Franzen, the president of the Tabernacle Historical Society, for coming and helping me. And also Mike Patterson, who helped with the field work and also maintains the property, which really made this survey possible, because you really need a clear ground, because you're pushing this thing along the ground, and it's actually dragging. So yeah, shout out to them. This is the baseline here. So this time I set a baseline along this access road. This is actually the end line actually, but 2 feet apart, I put it this time. So a little bit tighter of transects than before, but this way, if you're, it was set this direction also because this, I have to say this, the graves that are marked there are oriented perpendicular to Carranza Road, so that means they're long axis. If we're doing parallel transects with Carranza Road, we're gonna hit their long axis, hopefully. So that's why it was set this way, every 2 feet. And with 2 foot, you can expect to at least hit them twice, hopefully, maybe 3 times. For an adult, for a child's grave, it's a little more difficult. But total of 96 transects were done. So here's an example, transect 64. I chose this one because it was
Wait, that's,
interesting.
don't you have to double that for the amount of time of walk?
Yeah,
You actually
yeah.
have to-
And I kept back after each one. Yeah.
It's almost 200 times.
So this one, it was a long day. This one was interesting, and I chose this one because it crossed the access road here. You can see it appears to be more compacted. That's why I believe we're getting that reflection. And then you've got just a lot of hyperbolas, and then there were some marked graves on this transect as well. So this right here represents a marked grave. This one here, and I believe this one here. So I got an idea for what it was looking like. We're getting these strong hyperbolic reflections. So there's 96 of these. And so I was looking at them, kind of driving myself mad, like, what do I consider a grave? What do I not consider a grave? So after a while of staring at these things and going cross-eyed, I decided I was just gonna plot points on almost indiscriminately on every hyperbola that I saw, basically. So it ended up looking like this for each one of the 96 lines. So I have all of these plotted. That way I figured if I did this, the data would speak for itself in a way. So this is what I got.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
There was 1,782 data points that I ended up plotting. So this is most of them. These are all the ones between 0 and 9.5 feet.
Oh.
And yeah, there's a lot to look at here, but there's a lot of very telling things with this that I want to point out. And so there are marked graves at this cemetery. Most of the marked graves are up in this area, pretty much all of them. So you can see there's a lot of red and orange. And the way that these are colored is that between 4 and 7 feet, that's where the red and sort of darker orange ones are. And you can see there's a lot more up in this area where the marked graves are. So some of these actually represent marked graves. And so that makes sense. But then down here, we've got a lot as well, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. But here, let's see. Okay, this right here, this was a very strong reflection that I got right at the edge of the maintained area. So this is all woodland that was not maintained, so I couldn't perform the survey in there. But I got this one, I think strong contender for an unmarked burial right at the edge. So there could be more up here. Also, this is where George Year's grave is. And so looking back at that veterans map, about 50 feet away, towards the road and a little bit to the north, is this blank area, which I think might be evidence actually of where the foundation was. I think I forgot to point this out, but if you remember the photo of the building, it's built on stone piers. Does not have a significant foundation that you'd expect to see in the subsurface. So we're looking at that. I think maybe there was less trees, so there's less roots and other intrusions that would create reflections in the data. So I'm good possibility of building a straight dam.
Do you know how deep Ayers burial was?
It was not as deep as a lot of the others. It appeared to be, I think it was about 5 feet, or maybe 5.5 feet. Maybe even less, but
Okay.
some of these other ones, they're deep, they're like 8+ feet. So,
I couldn't tell because it looks like the center of that circle is yellow and that would mean.
yeah, that might have been a root intrusion over top of it or something like that.
There's no marker.
No.
There is a marker.
Oh, there is,
Yeah, yeah.
that's why I was wondering.
So I wanted I took GPS points on a lot of the gravestones that are standing, but the GPS was giving me an accuracy of about 10 feet. So it was just, they were all over the place and they weren't useful. So I didn't, I would be making it up if I put them here, so I didn't. Here, I've gotten rid of a lot of the noise. All the ones between 0 and 5.5 feet are not represented here, so you can see a lot clearer. And granted, some of the burials, like George Ears, is gonna be lower than 5 feet, but this gave me a good picture of what might be there. And particularly interesting is these ones near the road, because there's no markers here at all. And we've got some pretty telling alignments. These 3 here, these 3 here, and these 3 here. And also, those are ones I'm crossing 3 times. It's not always gonna work that way, like 2 or even 1 can still potentially mean that there's a burial there. But yeah, where the building is, no, there's nothing. So surrounding the building, there's a lot, so not all of these are burials, but I do think some of them are.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
Please for a second, where's the road that goes behind the?
It's here. Crosses through here.
Like that could have.
Yeah, so this part of the driveway basically curves around like that. In the LiDAR image, which I did not include, you can see it better, because you can still see the. But yeah, it's so here's George Ears' grave, and it crosses right in front of him.
Right in front.
So basically went over this, there's potential for many unmarked burials at the site, including several near the road, so that's concerning. But also possibly more in that unmaintained wooded area in the back. And the building was probably right there in that empty area. So quick, this one's short because I have not analyzed this data yet, but I collected a lot of it. This is a project that we're doing at Whitesbog Village. Basically, I was asked to do in this specific location. Oh, wait, let me go back to that. So here's the general store. Oh wait.
Whoops.
Here. So we're just down North Whitesbog Road there in this empty clearing. Right here. Baseline set along the road every foot this time. And I walked a total of 124 transects. And I just walked straight to the wood line and then back and back. Oh. Lori helped out on this one. She helped me clear it because there was a lot of sticks and stuff in the way that we had to move, so it was a lot of wood. There was also a tree in the way, which is why there's this big blank area. Couldn't go around that one. So yeah, we're looking for potential for historic buildings in this area because there's some evidence, there's some yucca plants and other things that generally weren't planted unless there was buildings nearby. So that was the thought there, but we've got this is mainly the reason I wanted to show this, even though I haven't finished analyzing the data, is because we have this new equipment now, this new software, which allows us to create these depth slices. So this is a depth slice from half a foot in the ground over the entire, all 124 transects.
Hmm.
So just in my quick analysis, I feel like there's a possibility for a little walkway here and maybe a small building right there. Nothing really visible from the ground, but that's, that's a possibility. And so this essentially is those data points that I created. These dark marks are like the tops of the hyperbolas, essentially.
What
So-
depth is this slice?
Half of it.
And this is surface to,
Yeah, sir, a half foot from the surface. So yeah, there's a lot more to come with this one, so kind of a cliffhanger, but there will be more. Here's my citations. A lot of the stuff. I'm gonna have to do
Some of
those
that.
applications.
This is
You're
fascinating.
published.
So fascinating.
I think you have a very interesting job.
Yeah, there's parts of it that are. This.
Yeah, anybody have questions, comments? This is just incredible.
If you wanna find those two, the St. Mary's and the AME Church surveys, they're available on our website here, the reports are here.
Cool, okay.
So. Check them out.
Mark, how do you go about selecting your projects?
The St. Mary's was started before I started here, and then the AME Church, the Tabernacle Project was Rick Franson, from the president of the Tabernacle Historical Society, approached us, and
Uh-huh.
it seemed like an appropriate project.
Any other questions or comments?
If you're interested in tackling another cemetery, let me know.
Okay, yeah, I believe is there one in Hamilton that you mentioned?
There's one, Landisville,
Right, oh, okay,
1808.
okay. Awesome, yeah, I'd love to. I was always also told about one that is apparently potentially underneath the parking lot at site.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah, so,
Yikes.
yeah, definitely.
I have to say, I'm almost embarrassed. I
We're
was
so
running
weird.
around my bike down on Pinelands all the time, and I didn't even know. I didn't know. Right.
Wow.
Smaller than air pocket you can have.
Pretty small. In fact, I talked to the science guys about this because I guess people have used this to identify snake dens and whatnot.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I know you can calibrate the machine to send a stronger but shorter signal. There's ways to mess with it like that. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Okay. I'm absolutely fascinated by this, the relativity of dielectric permittivity that you put on there, because some of it's almost counterintuitive. The things that are frozen seem to have a lower permittivity than things that have water.
Yeah.
That are wet.
yeah, if you've ever watched the Ice Road Truckers show, they use GPR to determine when the ice is thick enough to drive the trucks on. That's actually.
Yeah, it's really, is that because because the atoms are solid, no, that doesn't make any sense either, because metal. It has to do with the density and whether it's moving or not, maybe, I mean, because water. I don't know, the words, I just was wondering if you did, so.
I wish I did, I do not.
Okay.
Very cool. All right, I think, yeah, oh, it's not on here, yeah, I was like. I thought it was, all right, public comment period, Paul, can you put the phone number on the screen, please, is there anyone in the room who wanted to give a public comment? Come on down.
Hi, Emil DeVito, New Jersey Conservation Foundation. I just want to thank Stacy and Chuck Horner for hosting that meeting a couple of weeks ago with the DEP about the dumping on Magnolia Road. seems to me that the Pinelands Commission staff is far more concerned about it than the DEP. And I don't think the DEP is going to enforce any kind of non-degradation or anti-degradation standard without you guys continuing to pay attention. Because I just don't think they care. I'm not satisfied at all with what DEP's done in a year and a half. The stuff is still sitting there, polluting stuff that Jay run. And I don't even think they know what they're looking at. That's just my opinion. The other thing I just want to mention based on your discussion today is, and I wish the Pinelands Commission had enforcement abilities, because maybe then something could have happened there by now, because it's a year and a half and the stream is still being polluted. And running into our preserve. You mentioned that you're going to talk to Green Acres about artificial turf at some point, some brief comment. I just want to let you know that from my experience in northern and central New Jersey, Green Acres does nothing about artificial turf because they promote active recreation. And I've seen forests and wetlands and ball fields, grass ball fields, all being converted to artificial turf. Not only that, I've seen whole parks been destroyed. The most important example is Thomas Edison Park in Edison in Middlesex County. The whole entire park is going to be destroyed. All sorts of wonderful trails and grass and trees, and turned into a gigantic 14-field complex that's going to be run commercially and basically steal money from the park system. And it's totally permitted by Green Acres. It's just complete. I just don't understand what they're doing. So I don't know what you're going to learn from Green Acres. That's all. I'm just giving you that bit of forewarning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else in the room? Heidi here.
Hello, Heidi Gay from Pinelands Preservation Alliance. Just want to commend you for the work plan. It looks really good and ambitious. So I hope that you'll be able to get through all those issues. Especially thankful for the artificial turf inclusion, as well as the protected plant species list. The only additional thing I might recommend is something related to tree conservation, such as the no net loss of trees policy, or simply better, if there's some better way to enforce tree removal. I know most of the tips that we get from concerned residents are about excessive tree removal, and we find usually the Pinelands Commission is aware of this and has issued letters to the towns, but we don't usually see action that follows that. And with the DEP Green Acres, with artificial turf, they have an addendum where they ask applicants to think about various issues with artificial turf. They don't do it in very strong language, and from the completed addendums that I've OPRA'd with successful Green Acres applications, we see a real refusal of the applicants to actually engage with the issues. So like some of the answers they provide are like NA not applicable, or this hasn't been an issue. So although I had recommended perhaps an addendum like this for the Pinelands Commission in the past, we can see with DEP that this is not actually effective at making the applicants consider or take these issues seriously. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Anybody on the phone?
There are no callers.
All right, I'm right there.
I'm sorry, can I say one more thing that I forgot?
Yeah, just come up, please, to the microphone for our viewers.
Yes, I wanted to mention too, thanks for expanding the rare plant list on the work plan. We think that's very important. And that could come into play, with, especially on parklands where, there's this change of use and conversion of parklands from forests or meadows or whatever it might be to artificial turf. So, especially on land that's already public parkland, applicants should have to do surveys for rare plants, and Green Acres doesn't make me do it. And there's a thing in the change of use regulations for Green Acres that says that rare species have to be considered, which means nothing, because considered means you ignore it. So if you ever develop important regulations about artificial turf, they should have to take seriously rare plants that you have on your list and not just ignore them and not have to survey for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Still nobody on the phone?
Still no callers.
Still shutting it down. All right, thank you, everyone. Great meeting today. Before we move to adjourn, any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, if any? Commissioners? All right, hearing and seeing none. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, everybody. Have a great